All right, all, welcome to 15 Minutes to BIM. Those of you joining us today, again, a big welcome back. And those who are new, thank you for joining me for today's 15 Minutes to BIM webinar. My name is Karen Pierce, and I'm a BIM specialist at Unify Labs. Unify Labs is the leading provider of content management solutions, storing any and all content on the cloud. This series, like always, is where we promise to take no more than 15 minutes of your time to introduce, perhaps increase, or if we're lucky, intensify your BIM knowledge and insight into the industry. As always, I invite all questions throughout this presentation. Myself, I've been in the industry for 10 years. I've been an MEP designer, an architectural BIM manager, and now I've been doing software trainings and implementations for our Unify customers. I love working with each of our customers and journeying with them, training them, and assisting with all the implementation of Unify their company requires. Each organization, while unique, does face many of the same challenges. Also joining me as a panelist is Scott Scheipel, our Senior Manager of Customer Success, and we'd love to hear from you. Scott will be fielding all questions following the webinar, so please use the Q&A tool throughout the presentation, and we'll answer all of them at the end. Today's webinar is the final edition of a three-part series. Today we'll be analyzing the results of our model metrics. In case you missed it, our last two 15 Minutes to BIM webinars regarding project analytics is live on our webinar channel, on our YouTube channel. Whether you're a Unify customer or not, if you have an interest in project analytics, please reach out to set a free trial. Well, now, without further introduction, we'll jump right into it, reviewing our project analytic data. The first 15 minutes to BIM we discussed is troubleshooting the REVIT model and what the typical process currently looks like. Whenever you're troubleshooting a REVIT model, and we're just talking about maybe diagnosing a slow model for a real quick moment, you really have to answer certain sets of questions. You have to identify whether it's user-based, model-specific, or whether we're looking at all models throughout the organization that's suffering. All of these can attribute to certain things like network speed, updates perhaps needing to be installed, or user-based errors such as maybe too many links are imported into the model, too many work sets are on, or REVIT warnings have become a bit unmanageable. With our second session, we actually reviewed how to start classifying maybe REVIT warnings, triaging that set of data. So within the Project Analytics portal, if you click on the Settings tab, this is where you can start to categorize those warnings. By default, everything will come in as uncategorized, and uncategorized warnings will not affect your model health score. So during today's presentation, you'll see how we've identified warnings as critical and not critical, and how that can really affect our particular model health. Also in that second session, we viewed the other set of settings with our health indicators. Once you are able to triage your REVIT warnings, we also pay attention to the number of those non-critical warnings, REVIT links, CAD links, imports, images, etc. So what we walk through within that second training is some best practices for all of these particular settings. All right, so without further ado, we're jumping right into it. So once you get into the Project Analytics portal, this is where we're able to take a look at our entire organization at a glance. We can see the total number of projects and the total number of models. We can also see the sync time over the last week, but we can easily adjust that date range like we've mentioned before. My average sync time is reading 29 seconds, but what we'll be troubleshooting today is that the longest sync time is reading 5 minutes and 55 seconds. So we're going to identify why that is. We're going to look at critical REVIT warnings like you see here, but we'll also be paying attention to images, in-place families, and plan regions. All right, so in order to access this particular REVIT model that's taking 5 minutes and 55 seconds, I have gone ahead and hovered over that particular long sync time, and what I'm going to do is simply click on it. All right, so now that I've clicked on it, I'm taken directly to the model at fault, and I'm able to see the overall health score here. This overall health score is reading a 4.4 out of 10, but I do also have some historical health scores where it's gotten as low as a 3.9. The first thing we're going to be evaluating is critical REVIT warnings. You can see that I've got a number of them, 415 in particular, that need attention. If I just scroll down from where I'm currently located, I can actually see all of the different categories of those 415 warnings. 415 warnings are spread out into 6 categories: imported models out of range, critical grid lines, highlighted lines overlap. Keep in mind though, I can always adjust these settings if I deem that perhaps the highlighted lines overlap is not actually a critical warning at some point in time. All right. right, so the other things that I'm actually really going to be wanting to pay attention to, warnings aside, are image files. Images and having 62 of them within my Revit model is certainly a bit concerning. So in order to access those 62 imported images, I can simply click on the Content tab, select the type of content from here, and I'm actually pretty lucky in this case. I've only got about 6 different images actually in use, so a simple purge all can help improve this model health score. In-place families, I have 56 of them next. I'll also be talking about plan regions before we come back and revisit this page where we have 24 of them. So again, on the Content tab, getting into the images side, before we get into in-place families, one of my favorite features of Unify is how we're really able to ensure that Unify is being utilized throughout your Revit projects. Whenever a piece of content is actually inserted from Unify within your project, we'll be able to compare the Unify revision in the model to the current Unify revision. This way we'll ensure that if anything needs to be updated, we'll be right on top of that. By sorting by the number of instances placed, as well as in-place families, now what we're able to do is actually not only capture things like element ID and category, but the name. And with naming conventions, especially with in-place families, seeing numbers 66, 70, 26, 19, etc., somebody is copying and pasting in place families. And we all definitely know that should this family ever have to be updated, we're going to have to be updating every single instance. We're also able to see that the file size is going to be much larger than it would need to be if this family was actually just built the way that it may need to be built. Also on the Content tab, we can easily adjust the going from images to families to, of course, plan regions. And we'll have a whole bunch of other categories too that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But whenever we're sorting by plan regions, of course, our view names are available and we can see the quantity like other pieces of content. But whenever we notice where we have multiple instances of a plan region, this is somebody that's copying and pasting plan regions from view to view. We all know this is not a good standard practice. You really want to be able to create dependent views for that plan region. So should that plan region update, all the corresponding views will update with it. In this particular case, I'll have to update the level P1 to cubic yard dumpster study in 3 different areas. So that's going to be definitely going to be missing them along the lines of my workflow. All right, so once you clean up your Revit models, it's always going to be very important to be able to compare changes. Whenever you compare changes, you're able to see all of the categories of content like imports, links, views, families, etc. You'll really be able to see all of these in some granular levels. So this is a good standard practice that if you're noticing somebody copying and pasting those particular families, that they'll be able to get some guidance. Also, too, if I sort and expand out this families category, I'm also noticing that they're all not coming from Unify. So this particular user may not necessarily be aware of Unify application, or they may be loading content from other non-approved sources. The categories we're able to look at, I mentioned this just a bit ago, but CAD imports, CAD links, drafting views, I can expand any single one of these categories to see what's been added, what's been removed, and what's been changed. All right, so in conclusion, at least as far as this dashboard goes, a lot of our customers always ask, what is a good overall health score? So out of a 4.4 out of a 10, this is definitely concerning because I've already gone ahead and marked all of the settings for this particular project to classify which areas I really feel needs attention. I'm not going to be concerned with images if they're less than 10, for example. I wouldn't be concerned with in-place families if they were maybe less than 20. But because all of those areas do exceed those markers, this overall health score is something I'm going to want to pay attention to. Once I've adjusted these settings, this overall health score, I'd really expect to never want to see below an 8. All right, so for those Revit geeks, those API geeks that might be on the phone, our Project Analytics API is a way to actually be able to really extract some additional data out of the platform. We're able to look at families, of course, but with the API, you would be able to look at parameter values if you wanted to within those families, in addition to, of course, drafting views, sheets, rooms, spaces, etc. When you're able to actually classify those particular Revit warnings, Revit parameters and data, you can start to create a custom dashboard like you see here using Power BI, or perhaps other API processing platform you might have in use. This particular sample application was built with Python, and it really didn't take too many lines of codes. But here I'm able to actually either classify my sheet numbers and naming conventions matching my company standards, or that my model number parameters are actually fully within the families as I would like them to be. All right, so I hope I've piqued your interest to maybe learning more about project analytics, or perhaps I've taught you a little something about the platform if you haven't already. However, please feel free to schedule any sort of custom demonstration, and we'll be sure to walk through exactly what project analytics can do that's specific to your company. You can reach out to us at unifylabs.com/contact or email sales@unifylabs.com. And do stay tuned. Our next session is going to be talking about content library optimization. So rather than covering these high-level topics of project analytics like we have over the past few months, we're going to go back to basics, and we're going to be making sure that we set up our Unify platform to make a library that's very adaptable to change. So mark your calendar for the next 15 minutes to BIM, May 13th at 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Scheipel to assist with our Q&A.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen. So just 2 questions for today. Number 1, Karen, in your eyes, what is the single most important variable when dissecting model health?
The single most important variable when dissecting model health, in my personal experience, has always been paying attention to Revit warnings as well as imports. Those 2 items alone have been detrimental to my Revit projects. So those are definitely the 2 categories I'd focus on first.
Awesome. And then number 2, what's the best approach surrounding model update frequency, and does it matter how many individuals are working with it?
All right, so the best approach for model update frequency, per Autodesk's default out-of-the-box settings, they want you to sync every 30 minutes. If users don't sync at least as often as that, there can certainly be issues within the Revit model or risking significant amount of time with work being lost. Some reasons that users might not actually sync as often as they should is that there are more people working on the model than maybe the model can support. So whenever a user syncs, it is in direct correlation on that time of the number of other people working in it. So the sync time, even if the data is the same for 4 people, would work a lot faster than a sync time where there might be 8 people or 9 people within the model. So definitely keep some of those perspectives in mind.
Awesome. Great to hear. So with that being said, thanks everyone for joining. As Karen mentioned, we'll talk to everyone again during our next session on May 13th at 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern, which will move to a new topic on the best practice of basic things, which will be surrounding library structure optimization. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.